Right. A very good morning, everyone, and welcome back. And welcome to our colleagues who are joining us online. So Chana, welcome. Chana is the Deputy Chair of the IAASB-IESBA. It must be pretty well into the afternoon for you, so you're very welcome. Good morning, George. A very early morning for you. And Conchita, good afternoon. And Pam, I think you're in Hong Kong, is that right? So thank you for joining us. And I see Tom Nichu and who else is that? Can't see the low one, but anyway, welcome back. May I just start by thanking the PIOB for the lovely social event that we had in the beautiful gardens and terrace yesterday evening. It was extremely pleasant. Thank you very much, and gave us lots of time to have some good social interaction and conversations. So thank you very much for that. Also, thank you all for a very lively day yesterday. As I said, I didn't think we would actually be able to fill the day. How wrong I was. We actually went over time. And that's because it was such a good engagement, some very good quality conversations that continued, by the way, later into the evening. So thank you very much for that. So I also like to welcome our sort of public observers that are sitting around, and of course, the PIOB staff that I can see here. So thank you very much. So today we will start with the what we call session 3, which is the IAASB Firm Culture and Governance. What I will do is I'll hand over to you, Gabriella, as the chair, to just kick things off. And then we have Cam, who has been patiently sitting. Cam is an IAASB director, and she's currently, I think she's doing some outreach in Hong Kong, if I'm not mistaken.
She's in New York, but she's
in New York?
No, she's in Hong Kong.
She's in Hong
Oh,
Kong.
no, my briefing was she's in Hong Kong. So even the chair doesn't know what's happening. They're moving around so frequently. Anyway, so over to you, Gabriella.
Thank you very much, Alan, and good morning to all of you. Yes, it's true. I not always know where my team is. This is a really international team, so I was not aware that Cam was already in Hong Kong. So thank you very much for coming back, and I hope that you all had a very nice evening yesterday after the lovely cocktail reception we had in this beautiful garden. Let me just say a few words before I give the floor to Cam. Cam is a IAASB director, as Alan said, and she's currently the project team leader for the Firm Culture and Governance project. So she will present on the most recent evolutions of our work in that respect. This is not the first time that we address this group on this topic. I think it's probably the third time that we discussed this topic. And this is not only because we have been working on firm culture and governance already for some time now, but also because it's really important to get the advice, perspectives, and contributions of this Stakeholder Advisory Council. This is one of the, this is a strategic project that the IAASB is running. So very happy to be here again, getting your opinions on this project and the decisions that we are making. Just to set a little bit the scene and recall what happened before, because we have been working on this project for 2 years and 4 months now. It's a lot of time. And the reason why we decided and we continue working on this project is that first thing, we think that this is an important response to the moment that the profession and the firms are facing currently. One of the most challenging periods and phases, I think, the profession and the firms are facing. To a point that some call it an existential phase or period. I'm not going that far, but it's really an important moment where a lot of things are changing. I don't need to name them, the digital challenges that we have been speaking about, which impact and challenge the firms and the firms' culture and the firm's governance and the firm's business models and the firm's market distribution, etc. The impacts of private equity, which we have not seen yet fully, but that we are still already understanding can be huge and change a lot of things in the firms. The attractiveness of the profession, which has been at the center of the many conversations and many efforts welcome efforts not only from the firms, but also importantly from the PAOs who have been focusing on this issue, very much trying to revert something for the benefit not only of the profession, but the benefit of us all, because we need this profession and we need a robust, resilient, and a very well prepared profession with young people coming in and etc. So I'm not going to name the challenges that the firms are going through, but it's really an important moment. An important moment. We know that in this context, some ethical failures will continue happening, and some of them large or important ethical failures. Some of them not that important or that relevant. But the sum of these small and not that small failures or issues cause a lot of problems. A lot of problems to the profession in terms of reputation, and a lot of problems to the firms. A lot of problems to the public interest, because importantly, they affect or may affect the trust of investors, the trust of the public, the trust of everyone in the profession and in the firms. And that's precisely what the IASBA wants to address. We need the profession, we need a robust profession, we need robust firms, resilient firms, and everything that we all together can do to bring more robustness, to make sure that the firms are not that much impacted by these ethical failures, sometimes coming from what we call the bad apples. Sometimes it's not a problem of bad apples, but all in all, they have a potential of harm to the firms and to the public trust that we really need to address together. So I'm not going to go through the headlines of the last 5 years, because what we are doing here, it's not about the past, it's about the future. It's really how the IASBA is looking at this project. It's something that we want to live for the future of the firms, for the future of the profession, and importantly, which is our ultimate goal, for the public interest. Of course, this is it's not only a new project, well, not that new now, because it's been 2.5 years almost that we have been working, but the topic is new. And everything that is new, we know, may raise questions, doubts, sometimes some discomfort, and this is absolutely natural. If we look at all the important things that happened in the past, most of the times they start being seen as something strange, something uncomfortable, something that changes dramatically the way we are used to look at things. So it's normal that something, when the IASBA started working on something which is different from what we have been doing before, because traditionally the IASBA has been working on projects and developing standards and frameworks for the individual accountants, and this is about the firms. Of course, ultimately, it's something for the firms to drive the good behavior, ethical behavior of individual accountants and other people within the firm, but it's about the firm, how the organization is prepared to avoid people in the firm to take the wrong direction and adopt unethical behavior. So it's new, it may cause some discomfort, it triggers some questions, but you know that someone famous once said that doing the same thing exactly the same way and expecting different results and outcomes, it's the definition of insanity. We cannot be in a completely different world, environment, situation, new challenges, and expect that keep on doing the same things, looking at the issues the same way, with the same perspective, will result in something completely different that will really contribute to the additional resilience of the firms in a very disruptive environment. So we think that this is really a defining moment, and that's what that was our rationale 2.5 years ago when we proposed in our strategy and work plan consultation to address this topic. It was very welcome, supported, and etc. And our rationale was exactly that one. There is something different that needs to be addressed in a disruptive environment and when the challenges are changing so significantly. So the profession, the firms, and ourselves as standard setters, because if we are not part of the solution, we are part of the problem. We need to look at this and decide how we intend to walk this path and do this journey and face what's coming. And what's coming will probably be even more disruptive than what we have seen now with technology, with private equity, with the profession facing all these issues with attractiveness and also all these things. So I'm not going to tell you how we started this project. We shared everything with this group. We had a deep dive with breakout groups, a big discussion, I think 1.5 years ago or something like that. So we did all the job. We spent 1 year doing initial outreach, fact-finding and analysis. And after 1 year, December 2024, the project team delivered a report, which is public, where all the information that we gathered during that year is included, and proposed the IASBA board to start a standard setting project. That was December 2025. There was a decision to do so, but in December 2024, in June 2025, after 6 months of work, reflection, etc., the IASBA made a decision to resequence the work and start by doing not only additional outreach and etc., but also to develop some non-authoritative material or whatever you want to call it, to be able to engage better with everyone, with the stakeholders, and make sure that once we would make a decision on what this project was going to be, we would have certainty about the opinions of everyone, the information that we needed to gather, the unintended possible consequences, etc. So we decided to provide ourselves, but importantly, stakeholders, not only additional time, but it was not only about time, it was really to do additional work. We'll tell you about, Cam will tell you about the work that we have been doing, very innovative ways of approaching outreach and engagement with everyone, with all stakeholders, very importantly, and very much with the firms who are the target or the subject of this project, in a phase which is previous to any decision that we made. So this is completely new. I would say that never before the IASBA has done so much work, so much outreach, so much engagement before making a decision about what to do with this project. This decision is going to be made in June, next June, by the IASBA board. And the decision is what kind of framework are we going to develop? We developed these viewpoints, which are already familiar to you, I believe. Based on that, we have been engaging in a very significant way with a lot of people, with a lot of initiatives and etc. that Cam will tell you about. And based on everything that we will have collected, and of course, based on our own reflection about what this means against the public interest objectives that we want to pursue, but of course, importantly, having in consideration the impact, the consequences, etc., of this project, we will make a decision about what this framework is going to be. Is it going to be, and where it is going to sit in the code, outside the code? What kind of authority will this project have? It's going to be fully authoritative or a fully non-authoritative or a hybrid approach. That decision has not been made, and I want to repeat this 100 times. Probably I already did it, but we have not made a decision. The decision is going to be made after we process all the information of 1 year of research, one report, another year of work, and these 6 intense months between January and June, where we are engaging with everyone in very innovative ways. We have probably conducted the most extensive and representative outreach and engagement ever. Over time, of course, we have heard significant support and significant criticism, and we have not overlooked any of them. So we are digging deep into everything that we hear, everything that our stakeholders bring, and trying to process it in an appropriate way, not neglecting anything that we hear. And we have heard the most different things you can imagine in terms of support, in terms of criticism. So this decision is going to be really the product of this journey, this intense journey. This journey was not only necessary, as it puts us here today, convinced that this project is even more important than it was 2 years ago. If anything, when we started, we had a strong conviction about it. Today, the conviction is even stronger, but we are also more aware of the need to do the right thing for this project and the product that we want to deliver to work appropriately, to work as it should for the firms as we aim it to work. In June, we will make that decision. This decision is going to be the product of everyone participating. Of course, it's not going to be possible to please everyone, and it's not the purpose. The purpose is to make the best decision. But one thing that I need to reassure you about is that this is going to be the product of the reflection and the work and the analysis that we will do on everything that we will have heard. This conversation today is part of a set of very significant outreach moments that we have been having over the last 4 months. It was in our list of important outreaches, but it's not because it was in our list of important outreaches that it is important. It's because we have a precious group of people from different backgrounds with no agendas, etc., coming here and telling us what they think, what you think about the project. So I'll stop here now and give the floor to Cam, who is online and who will present you about the most recent developments on the Firm Culture and Governance project. Good morning or good afternoon, Cam, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Gabriella, and hello, everyone. And thank you for the introduction. Next slide, please. So just on the next slide, oh, okay. For some reason on my screen, the next slide isn't showing it, but I see it on your projector screen. So as Gabriella just covered, the FCG project has been ongoing for the past 2.5 years, as you can see in this slide. It started in 2023 and now in 2026. Our last update to the SAC members was in October last year. And at that juncture, the FCG project team was in the midst of developing the FCG viewpoints as a result of this resequencing that Gabriella mentioned, and as a result of a recalibration in IASBA's overall strategy determined in June 2025. I'll speak more on the FCG viewpoints and how they were developed and its purpose in a little bit. But on the next slide, I won't spend too much time on these slides because I know, Gabriella, you went through them very comprehensively as well. I'd just like to highlight that the viewpoints that have been developed at this juncture are to be used as an instrument for discussion, which we have been doing over these past 5 months now, and will be continuing to do so for the next 2 weeks until the IASBA June 2026 meeting, at which the IASBA will decide on the way forward for the FCG framework in terms of its location and authority and content reflecting on stakeholder engagement from these IASBA viewpoints. On the next slide, please. So what are the IASBA viewpoints? These are enclosed in your agenda materials. So that's agenda item 3B. And they are essentially the distillation and analysis by the IASBA of the 2.5 years so far of extensive information gathering activities. So this is all the information gathering summarized in the working group's final report issued in December 2024. Including academic research and literature covering on a number of jurisdictions on the topic of organizational culture, and 6 global roundtables held during 2025. They pull out the consensus-driven insights and messages from all these stakeholders on each one of the framework elements, which I'll go into in a later slide, but they reflect these messages, and they also incorporate the IASBA's own perspectives and reflections in the public interest for each one of these elements. They also represent all the characteristics of these elements and how these elements are intended to work together cohesively. Now, these viewpoints in agenda item 3B, they are being used by the IASBA as a tool for discussion, really to inform stakeholders as to what an FCG framework and the characteristics of such a framework might look like and might entail. They are not the framework, I should emphasize. They are just to be used for discussion with stakeholders, and really to seek further stakeholder input on three key questions. The first is, what should the location and authority of a FCG framework be? So for example, should it be inside the code, or should it be outside the code through various non-authoritative guidance? Or it could be a combination of both. So this is a tool and instrument for discussion. Furthermore, it's also used so that we can dive deeper into what characteristics of each of these FCG elements can be further used to develop enduring principles of the framework, and furthermore, where further clarity or further consideration with respect to proportionality, scalability, and implementability should be considered. So again, the feedback from all of this will help inform the IASB's decision in June 2026. Next slide, please. So the 8 elements that I mentioned, and as previously also presented at SAC meetings, are set out on this slide here. And so they range ethical leadership, oversight and governance, independent input, education and training, accountability, incentives, open discussion and challenge, and transparency. All these elements are intended to work together holistically, and the viewpoints reflect these key characteristics to building a robust firm culture governance. Next slide, please. Now, I'd like to highlight here that during the development of the viewpoints, and even subsequent to the development of the viewpoints during the first couple of months of this year, we are aware that there have been numerous questions with respect to how do the viewpoints themselves interact with the IAASB's ISQM1 standard on system of quality management. So to explain these linkages, the IASBA, together with the IAASB, developed a paper which essentially compares the viewpoints with the principles of the ISQM1. Here, I'd like to just again highlight, it's not a like-for-like comparison. They're very different documents. As I mentioned, the viewpoints is a tool for discussion. It's not a final product. It's not a final framework, and they're different in authority. However, the key outcomes of this comparison exercise is twofold. Firstly, there is indeed similarities between the two. First, fundamentally because of the relationship between ethical culture and the system of quality management. ISQM1 does recognize that ethical culture is necessary in order to drive high quality engagements within the scope of the IAASB standards. However, where it's very fundamentally different is that they are different in objectives, scope, and focus. The viewpoints are intended to assist firms with fostering an ethical culture across the whole of firm and across all individuals in the firms, from senior leaders, partners, managers to more junior staff, and also includes all service lines, including those that are outside of audit and other assurance. And the focus, again, is to foster an ethical culture. Next slide, please. Now, as Gabriella alluded to, we've embarked on a very intensive and a new way of stakeholder engagement, really to listen to what stakeholders have to say about the location, authority, and content of these viewpoints, so that the IASBA can further decide how to develop the FCG framework at its meeting in June. So starting in Q1, using these viewpoints that were developed as a basis for discussion, in Asia, we had targeted outreach with a variety of firms, professional accountancy organizations, regulators, and investors, precisely to discuss these 3 questions on the viewpoints on the framework: location and the impact of the location and authority of the framework, the content of the viewpoints and which could potentially become principles of the framework, and what could better be developed in terms of clarity, implementability, and proportionality. And so in Asia, this was targeted outreach in Singapore, Malaysia, Hong Kong, and Australia. And in addition to this targeted outreach, we have our institutional stakeholder meetings, which includes with regulators such as IFER Standards Coordination Working Group, IOSCO C1, and of course with the SAC today with you, and in a couple of days also with our jurisdictional standard setters. Finally, we also have embarked on a series of focus groups. Now, there's 3 focus groups really with a deep dive to discuss these 3 matters, and that's with the representatives of the IFAC's small and medium practices advisory groups, representatives of the Global Public Policy Committee, and also representatives of jurisdictional and international regulators. So each focus group lasted about 3 to 4 hours. So it's really an in-depth dive into their perspectives and insights for each of these questions on location, authority, and content. Later in a couple of weeks, in a week or two's time, in early May, we will have a multi-stakeholder meeting to further advance this discussion arising from the focus group. So what this means is that all the representatives of each of these focus groups will be gathered together at this meeting, and where there will be open dialogue so that everyone can hear the perspectives of each other with respect to these questions, and further enable open dialogue and transparency in order so that we can progress the discussion and further inform IASBA's decision. In mid-May as well, and we're very aware that ultimately any results of unethical behavior and ethical failures, this ultimately has an impact on investors and users of financial and non-financial information. So we do have a very focused meeting, a targeted meeting with the newly established UAG User Advisory Group with the IASBA and IAASB. So we're looking forward to that meeting and the inputs from these users. Finally, we also have a simulation exercise with 2 firms, really to understand how these viewpoints might operate in the context of the real life facts and circumstances of a larger firm and a smaller firm. Now, as Gabriela and I've also just mentioned, the inputs and the feedback from all these various dialogues will help the IASBA determine the best approach forward in terms of developing the FCG framework. And in June, what the project team will be presenting to the board is a set of various options for the way forward. And this could include whether or not the FCG framework is inside the code, outside the code, and whether and combined with non-authoritative guidance. It'll also propose some options for the potential enduring principles to be included in this framework. Next slide, please. Now, these are the questions for SAC members' considerations here, and I won't read them out. I know they're in the papers and currently presented on the slide. But before I hand it back to Alan, maybe I just want to ask Gabriela, Chana, or Ken if you want to add on anything.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you. Just I'd like just to add 2 very short thoughts that I missed at the start, and I think it's maybe important to inform this conversation. The first one is something that we had in mind from the outset of this project, which is the need to offer a global baseline in terms of firm culture and governance. And this is because we know, and we learned over these 2 years and a half, that some firms already have very robust and structured frameworks implemented in the firms, sometimes throughout the firms, in terms of firm culture and governance. This is, however, something specific to some firms, individual firms. We cannot say that it's the reality for most of the firms. And secondly, they are left alone to their own thinking about what's the best framework that they should put in place. So this idea of a global baseline against which the firms can assess how they are evolving and implementing their firm culture and governance elements and etc. It's extremely important and helpful. We cannot, much more successful and building much more resilience across the firms than the individual initiatives that each one of them may take. The second thing, and it's really about resilience, it's what we have seen over these 2.5 years, and the world changes so fast. When we started, private equity, for instance, was not in the horizon. I mean, we knew that it existed, but it was not pervasive, influential, impactful as it is today. Technology was there, but it became something pervasive and changing everything. So this idea of resilience, of keeping the firms robustly prepared for impacts and changes, it's also something that confirmed and reinforced our conviction about the importance of this framework. For instance, changes in ownership of the firm we cannot leave the firms in the hands of whoever owns the firm in each moment. And changes in ownership are happening every day. We heard in the news today, Australia, which was where this phenomena was not basically known or a reality, that there was something today in the news about it. So it's happening every day. It was not something that in the past the firms were used to deal with, but it's necessary to think that when ownership changes, there are always impacts or the risk of significant impacts in the culture and the governance. If the firms are prepared for that resilience, that structured approach to firm culture and governance will help them or may help them stay as robust as they are, irrespective of these changes in ownership and these changes in business models driven by technology, and other things. So sorry for this, but I had forgotten to mention this, and I thought it was important to inform the conversation. Alan, back to you.
Thank you very much, Cam, and thank you, Gabriela. But before we just go into the conversation, just to help Doug, because you just mentioned there's some hot news about Australia. Would you like to just share with, because I can see Doug about to begin a search. Or Doug, do you know about that?
To be honest, I didn't read the media this morning, and so I'll go and Google that.
Okay. So what is that? Gabriela, are you able to?
Was that Grant Thornton agreed to sell part of its to a private equity group? Grant Thornton, Australia. Right?
Sorry, that came out a couple of months ago that they were exploring that. Yes, so there has been quite some focus on all the questions that have been raised in this group about what that means for independence, governance, what are the interests of private equity, exit strategies, is it short-term profit, and all of the same questions. Yes, that's right, but it's new for Australia. There's been a previous case where there was consolidation and listing of a firm, but we haven't had the same private equity questions.
Thanks, then. Okay. Right. So we limited to just that. I think you want to have some feedback, conversations, etc. So the other thing is in the chart, Cam, you talked about specific outreach in Asia Pacific. Yeah, on the the Asia. Was that just because you happened to be there? I mean, not because you decided that you're not going to have the outreach with the other regions, because I guess you're doing that through your focus groups, etc. Is that right?
Yes, we happened to be in Asia. This was an outreach that had been planned for more than 6 months before. In my case, I hadn't been to Asia as a structured outreach since the start of my term. So we happened to be there. We were addressing topics such as sustainability, very importantly, private equity, CFOs, FCG, from culture and governance, but we happened to be there when these dialogues were launched. So that was the case. Yes, and yes, we are doing outreach with all the regions and making sure that through the many institutional meetings that we have, like this one, but also through the focus groups and simulations, the 2 simulations that we made a point to do with the firms in different parts of the world, one in Europe, one in this case, Asia.
Dwayne, off the blocks.
Thank you. And I commend the team for the extensive outreach that you guys have been doing. And I think, you know, as you mentioned, Gabriella, it is somewhat unprecedented. So well done on that to make sure you're getting all the input. I also appreciated the thoughtful framing of the 8 viewpoints. I wasn't in the original working group report. I wasn't exactly seeing the linkages that you now are more clearly setting forth. So I appreciate that. As you know, I had questioned the need for focus in this area initially, especially from a standard setting project, and particularly I was concerned about the broad scope suggested by the working group report in terms of some of the things you've mentioned, Gabriella, about, somehow covering how firms should be thinking about networks, how they should think about their firm ownership structures, how they should think about service line offerings. And, I continue to believe that, I guess 2 things. One, I don't see that anymore as prominent in the viewpoints. And I think that's actually comforting to me, because I think that is probably, those types of things are beyond the remit, in my view, of IAASB and probably more government and market regulator kind of focus areas. And so I'm still a little unclear, and I'm going to be interested in the conversation today on this linkage, Gabriella, that, hey, as firms go through change, whatever that change might be, I think I'm hearing the underlying premise that that increases the risk of unethical behavior. And I guess I just, that I'm not sure I see that linkage, or that the research would suggest that one way or the other. And so, I think having ethics be front of mind across the firm and in decision-making in all aspects of the firm, I think is what I'm hearing you say is the objective, but that you're not trying to prescribe, oh, IASB is going to say that it's in the public interest that you don't have private equity. I know that's not what you're saying, but, and so I think that that was important as I'm, seeing where you are at the moment. I think your comparison to ISQM1 was very helpful. I personally believe that the firms in implementing ISQM1 have significantly strengthened their ethical frameworks, and in terms of many firms have hired chief ethics officers. They've strengthened the frameworks that they have. They put a lot of money into it. And I realize the view here is that, well, that's really focused on audit, and you're trying to make sure that there's a broader focus across the firm. I think, Ken, you and I were talking yesterday that you shared with me, and I think it's my experience as well, that often when firms, especially the bigger firms, when they're implementing ethical things across the audit practice, they're really, when they have values and ethical practices and incentives and disincentives, that's really applied to all their people. So I personally think de facto that in implementing ISQM1, the firms are approaching it across all their people. And, the big firms at least are holding all people in the firm accountable to these ethical concepts and whatnot. So when I looked at ISQM1, to me, it seems very comprehensive in terms of addressing all of the objectives that I see in the viewpoint papers. And so, I almost was thinking last night, well, maybe the project is more about guidance about how ethics need to really be addressed in ISQM1, because when you look at the requirements of ISQM1, all the things that are in the viewpoints are there. And I think the question that I'm hearing is, yeah, but are the firms really going to apply that beyond the audit practice? And that's the question. And then it gets to, my other concern initially was, what's the remit of IASB relative to accountants versus lawyers and actuaries and all these other types of people in firms that do you really have the authority, the jurisdiction to apply this across the whole firm? And how is IASBA thinking about that? Have you gotten legal input on that, et cetera, et cetera? So those are things that still are in the back of my mind. But I think the big message in terms of you're asking, have I seen firms improving their ethical constructs and building ethics more into the fabric, weaving it into the fabric of the culture? I would say yes. I saw that as firms were starting to put adoption when I was at the PCOB, and firms were starting to adopt ISQM1 and get ready for adoption. Seen it at EY, where I sit on the board as an INE. So I think some of the cheating scandals and some of the other high-profile lapses that you highlighted in the working group report, I do encourage us to make sure that as you go through whatever project you're going to go forward with, that there's robust root cause analysis and gap analysis to make sure that, is it really a gap in the standards, or was it simply just non-compliance? And how pervasive is it across the industry? And does it really warrant a standard setting solution? I continue to believe myself that it's more of a guidance solution is my, if I was king for a day, that's probably what I would do. And I think the other thing I'll offer is regarding the process going forward. It's very helpful to know that you're not looking at the wording in these viewpoints as like that's the standard, because I think, as you know, words matter, and there's all kinds of questions I had as I was looking at the specific wording, like, okay, is it appropriate to use the word prioritize here, or should it be consider or incorporate? And I think that's just one example of, I think, going through a robust due process consultation process where you're getting comments, and through a formal process that is transparent and to everybody is going to be really important, just like we had to do with ISQM1, including some of these concepts that were debated through that process. I also, as an INE, I guess I'll just mention, we don't have time here to go through it, but I will mention, I'd be happy to talk offline, that I think it's a little simplistic to expect that every firm is going to be able to have independent input. It's been difficult for the big firms to find the competency and the people that are independent and be able to find the right people to do these roles. And so I think it's maybe a little more challenging. It's going to be a little more challenging. The other thing I would point you to, and you probably looked at it, but the FRC governance code, I think they did a really nice job of laying out how INEs might be considered. And they also looked at the legal duty of care kind of aspects of INEs, because it's a really kind of a weird role. Like, I'm not a partner, so do I have a duty of care to the partnership? What is my duty of care? And the FRC addressed that directly, which has been helpful. And I think that they also have not applied it to all firms, because I think they work, well, I won't speak for the FRC, but my understanding is they realize it might be difficult for smaller firms to really have that robust kind of independent body overseeing their decision-making and strategies. And then I guess the only other thing I'd mention is obviously having this additional code on, or a framework on top of what's in ISQM1. We're going to have to be very careful that it's not duplicative or creating competing objectives or competing requirements that are going to cause confusion and increase cost. And I think that a really formal cost benefit analysis is going to be really important here to get buy-in across all the stakeholders that it's worthwhile to move forward. And I don't know that I've seen that kind of part of the analysis yet in terms of the cost of the system and how does it compare to the cost of investments already made in ISQM1. And in practice, ISQM1, as I said, I believe the firms are applying it to all their people anyway. even though technically it covers the audits as you guys highlighted. So those are some observations that I thought I'd share. Thanks.
Thank you. Very thoughtful and comprehensive, Dwayne. Should we take a few more? So I had Doug next.
Thanks, and Dwayne was very comprehensive, but perhaps looking at it admittedly from a bit of an Australian perspective as well, I reflect on, I think, culture, governance, values, behaviours, they're actually, there's expectations, they're fundamental to all organisations. Whether we're talking about firms, we're talking about corporations, financial services, even standard setters, by the way, ourselves. And it seems that there's a common interest in the reporting cycle in focusing on this, because it does go to the firms in terms of the trust, their reputation, confidence in the firms as well. And we're all about investors being able to have confidence in the information that's produced, and that largely is underpinned by the quality of the independent audit. So it does go to the value of the audit as well. I guess reflecting on this, while I take a number of Dwayne's points, there continue to be events that occur. And there's an element to which firms and others need to be seen to be responding to these matters as well. Certainly when events occurred in Australia, it was a big focus of legislators, and it went to government contracting and the like. But I think also, while I appreciate the value of multidisciplinary firms and having the services, tax and whatever that can support the audit, they're also involved in consulting services. And in doing so, they're to a degree leveraging off the firm name and the reputations built from audit. And so it goes the other way, that you want to also protect the brand name when those services are actually provided as well. And I've even heard from audit partners who are concerned about the services sold to their clients, and if they're not well executed, what that can mean to the audit engagement itself. So I do think it's an important area to look at. Haven't yet, of course, seen a draft. It's too early. I appreciate the process that's still being gone through. I guess a couple of reflections. In any standing thing, I appreciate cost benefit is part of the equation. And I do understand the scalability question. That's already been mentioned, by the way. If you've got a two-partner firm, the ability to have the same level of independent input may be something that needs to be thought about. So I get all of those points, but I think you're saying that you're alert to those as well. To some degree, you want the right flexibility for the right measures, for a particular firm. How centralized it is it global level, is it national, command and control, and so forth. And I do, while I do get the point about the authority, well, firstly, I'd say IAASB clearly has a broader remit than the IAASB, and I'll come back to that in a moment. But it shouldn't be a case of not dealing with some of these questions because of particular jurisdictional standard setters may not have remit to cover service lines. It's perhaps firms. It's still an important area, and it can be a competitive advantage for the firms in terms of reputation and so forth. So I think all of that needs to be thought about. Just a reflection on ISQM1. Yes, it's focused on assurance and does have an impact on other service lines that are supporting assurance. But in Australia, China's probably one better place to talk about this. There's two versions of ISQM1. There's a straight ISQM1 from the IAASB, and there's another one which actually applies to all of the other service lines of the firms. I think that's getting to the point that, yes, you can have an impact on the other service lines through the assurance side, some of the overall structures, but it's still important to think about the services they provide beyond that. And of course, I'm thinking of some events in Australia, which have been very high profile in that regard as well. So I do think this is a really important project. I think it's in the interests of the firms as well. The extent to which it's standards, because principles might be in standards, and how much is in application material to allow for scalability and so forth. I haven't really thought completely through, but I do strongly support the work that you're doing and the project, and I appreciate you're still working through it, and we don't actually have a final product to look at the moment.
Thank you, Doug. Yinhua, please.
Thank you, Alan. I think first, it's a highly important project. Culture is the underlying fundamental force for high quality. Second, I congratulate the IAASB for this tangible products, the viewpoints. I really think it's helpful. It's fill the gap. On the standards, we only see the principles, but here it's much detailed guidance. Regarding the location of the final products, for me, I think we have substance of firm. We first developed the product, and I think it's useful. It's fill the gap. We needn't care too much at this stage about how it will be incorporated into standards. This product is useful. It can raise awareness. It can be a tool for capacity building. So that's enough. In the future, maybe some part of this products can be elevated to standards as long as it's enforceable. For ethics standards or code, it's much difficult. You need to make it enforceable. Regarding the future improvement of the viewpoints or the development of framework, I think regarding the title, it's interesting. It's have two elements, culture and governance. As Doc mentioned, that governance can be another subject. Culture is the same. So I think you are only focusing on the aspects of governance which support the ethical culture, not the whole governance, whole part of governance of accounting firms. FRC has developed a governance. So maybe the title can be rethink the title. Regarding the elements, it's also, I think the 8 elements is really helpful. It's a framework. Do we have other elements such as for accounting firm, you need to, for the values underlines the culture. You need to first develop or articulate the values your accounting firm pursue. So this may be fundamental and element. Maybe I'm wrong. So it might be helpful to consult some experts on cultural building. Some experts research culture building inside an organization. Maybe they can provide some insights. Finally, in China, we are doing a same project, on culture, firm culture. Maybe we can share this. IAASB's products are extremely helpful, informing us, and vice versa. We can share our research results to IAASB. We also welcome IAASB to conduct outreach in China's mainland. Thank you.
Thank you, Yeva. Just wanted to pause. I think we should just keep going and pick up all the points. Yeah. Well, it's up to you, how you, yeah, I think we should. So Hilda, you were next.
Thank you. Good morning to all. Thank you for the presentation on the firm culture and governance project. And, those two matters are very important within the profession. And I think they are very well discussed and much more discussed than in the future. I can't put it much closer. Okay, is this the right distance, Mr. Chairman? Great, thank you. So what we did, we had some informal discussions within, our constituency, and I think a lot of what came out of this relates quite well with what Duane said. So I just will focus on a few more matters. I think overall this resonates easier or better with larger firms that focus also and especially on public interest entities than on smaller firms and small and medium-sized practitioners. I think it was already referred to about independent directors, that is something for the moment in Europe for PIE audit firms of a certain level. The regulator requires that in the UK and in the Netherlands, not in other countries. So at least in our constituency, this is very much linked to something that has a regulatory background, that has, a regulatory authority, but also then a level of enforcement. So that's in the viewpoints, at least, that seems to be presented at something more absolute and general, which was questioned. I know that Gabriella, she referred to PIE investment, but that's maybe, I don't know, 20. I think in the Netherlands it's going to be 30% of the audit and accountancy firms, and that seems to be the highest in the world, but that's still not the other 70%. So maybe there is a consideration that needs to be given to that. A few more comments. It's more on the detail, I would say, and it makes it sound that within a firm, ethics is the most important thing. Now, it is very important, but there are many other things that are important as well. And it's, the quality of the work, the experience, and the expertise of people, and many other things that we all know. And so this it stands by itself, but it seems to be lacking a way to fit it into what is important overall, and that's maybe where ISQM1 comes in. Not sure. Also, oftentimes the wording is absolute. So I said this is not resonating very well with smaller firms, and that's often where they said, well, this is worded in such an absolute way, so this would potentially need to be more conditional. If you're in this and this and this situation, then this potentially would be a good idea, but not overall. I think that's the most important comments that we got on your viewpoints. Now, I don't know if that is useful for your framework. We didn't discuss about authority, things like that, because this is now, we would say, in a test phase. So that's how, guidelines, things to look at, to discuss. That's, I think, how within the profession it's currently seen and taken forward. And I think that's the phase in which people see this and would like to continue to see this, at least in the short term coming forward. Also, if you start to look at the framework. Thank you.
Thank you, Hilda. Natasha?
Close. So I guess sort of following on from comments that I made yesterday, I think the thing, and I realize that some of these were already answered, but just for the sake of kind of completeness with regards to the topic on the agenda, the thing that strikes me most clearly is that the agency problem, the structural problem that we have in the market is not called out at all. And I think you really need to call that out as a starting point, because that then frames kind of why we're doing what we're doing, why the proposals are there. Again, I think this goes well beyond ethics. I think it is a structural problem that requires a structural solution. The other point, before I go into some constructive proposals, is I do find it a little bit perplexing why, or if and why the audit industry wouldn't be welcoming this with open arms. Because for me, this is very core to establishing a social license to operate and the long-term future and sustainability of the business, particularly at a time of threats from AI, et cetera, you know, ensuring that there's something different about the firms and the way they're kind of really stepping up on independence, professionalism, and putting the end beneficiary, the users first, I think is really key. So I'd really like to see the audit industry actually embracing this and pushing this. And slightly perplexed as to why that's not happening, if it's not. So I'm just sort of reading between the lines a little bit here. In terms of ideas, and I'm not going to go into the 8 expectations, but I think that the thing linked to the fact that the structural agency problem is missing from the framing, then that then flows through to all of the kind of actual mechanisms that come through. So I would think that you need, above all, a mechanism at the board level, at a governance level, to ensure the user inputs. So not just IAASB, though I'm sure you're doing a super job, but making sure some of the independent non-execs, for example, are users. So they can bring that perspective, they can bring that challenge, and then make sure that, you know, the firms are kind of informed of the user's perspective in a very fundamental way. It would also be a mechanism, for instance, you know, the point made by Stephen yesterday about the private credit and rising concerns, for users to feed directly to the audit firm to say, look, we'd really like the firms at a thematic level to sort of really do work on this, because this is worrying the investment community. I think having a risk dashboard, for example, which is disclosed to investors, so covering obviously audit quality risks. So what are the key risks to audit quality, independence, threats, and including data on inspection findings, concentration risks, significant accounting judgments across the portfolio, these sorts of things at a firm level would be incredibly helpful. And then what the firms are doing to mitigate those risks. It's a little bit like what you'd have a listed company do with its principal risks, et cetera. But then what are the firms doing to mitigate those risks to independence, conflicts of interest, et cetera? And then reporting on the success of the mitigations that have been undertaken. Again, it just sort of flows through logically to me. Finally, and this is again a point that I made yesterday, I think it would be and is really important to have transparency from the firms around their advocacy. We know there's lots of advocacy, lots of participation even in investor groups at quite sort of at governance levels, you know, lobbying, obviously the government, things we would expect the industry to do. I mean, this is normal, but we need transparency around it, because I think for investors, again, having trust that the industry is lobbying in a way that benefits the investor interests is really important. What you don't want is the industry lobbying in a way that harms investors' interests. So we should have transparency around that, I think, for the public interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. Let's now go to our colleagues joining us virtually. So, David.
Hi, good morning. So great document, great presentation. The April 2026 paper, I think is fantastic. So if I go through I think the cornerstone, in my opinion, of maintaining public trust, which is fleeting, is this culture and guidance framework path. The uh, firm risk culture has continued to decrease with the change in ownership, in my opinion. From an organization driven on long-term goals, which was before LLPs, if you go back in time, to short-term profitability. So as we move more to equity companies, we'll move to less risk in the system, which is by design, right? Anybody who is operating in the system wants less risk, more profitability now. And before it was about building equity so that your retirement was a retirement product for partners, for people who worked in the system. And now it's a profitability product means. So the first question, what is driving the shift, I think is the change in the structure. As simple as that. The second question, what is the impact of a FSG framework being set? Should it be within the code, outside the code? Absolutely within the code. Mandatory adoption, not voluntary. And the third question, the elements, whether the viewpoints could evolve into key enduring principles. Yes, the 8 elements, especially E, incentives and disincentives, or I like to reframe it as simply risk assumed by signing officer or signing partner. It's the risk that has decreased. So you need to make it the signing officer has a risk, is disincentivized or incentivized when he signs. And if there is no incentive or there's no risk, then you have a problem. And I think this answers Natasha's earlier question. Uh, um, there's a less risk in the system today than there was before, and you're seeing the public trust leave us as a profession. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Matthew? Good morning.
Hey, good morning. Thanks. Yeah, no, I appreciate, the presentation and, the 2.5 years of, hard work and all, a lot's gone into this. Yeah, just take the questions one at a time. So, for question number one, this is just from sort of an, outsider, user perspective. So I think the practices shifting, at least what, that we can observe in terms of firm culture and governance, it does seem like there's been some practice shift in firm culture and governance really related to what's already been said, which is private equity investment in accounting firms and an increased emphasis on technology. And I think these are from sort of external factors from the industry, obviously technology being sort of exogenous, where, you've had advancements in the underlying technology itself, and private equity probably more relevant to this. And I think some of the impacts on firm culture and governance from that, at least so far from an outsider, it's difficult to tell. But I think I voiced some concerns yesterday just based on the historical track record there. Expectation shifting in firm culture and governance. So this one, it was a little trickier. Really the aspect of firm culture and governance or an important aspect of firm culture and governance, or sort of maybe perhaps downstream of it, is independence and the way that investors view firms' independence from their clients. And I would say this has remained a significant concern. There's just recently, in the US, the Center for Audit Quality, which sort of a group of, the largest accounting firms and whatnot, sort of affiliated with the IAASB-IESBA, I think noted that among institutional investors, 35% of institutional investors remain extremely or very concerned about firms' independence from the companies that they audit. And this is a little bit higher, maybe not statistically significantly different from the prior year. We had 31% concerned. I think some of our own surveys, the CFA Institute, auditor independence and strengthening that was rated as the highest priority for auditing standard setters. This is going back a couple of years. So I don't think that I think that aspect continues to be sort of, top of mind. So that's an expectation relating to firm culture and governance. I don't have, unfortunately, have survey results about some of these aspects that are elaborated specifically in the viewpoints. On question number 2, yeah, I think it's, agree with already been said. I think, something within the code would be potentially more impactful and seen as doing more, and something outside the code would be less impactful and seen as doing less. Pretty straightforward there. And focusing on the aspects, I think most interested in and see the highest impact or value add from adopting viewpoints or aspects of the viewpoints that can be measurable and identifiable or specific. And so things that we could really see, maybe some more sort of like structural features that firms adopt or are required to adopt that we can tell, versus things that are a little softer and difficult to ascertain, especially from the outside. So I think, to David's point, I agree. I was most interested in, just relating to that, most interested in the incentives and disincentives aspects of the viewpoints. I think that touches on, well, one, I think it's highly related to independence. And I think that there are aspects of that or practices within that could be identifiable and really measurable. Lastly, just want to comment on, I think there's been some conversation about whether this is outside the remit of the IASBA or inside the remit of the IASBA, and establishing things related to firms rather than individuals. Not an expert on this, but at least, just looking at the IASBA code today, it requires many things of firms, not just individuals. So there's many things that are firms shall do this, firms shall, and they relate to all service lines. So I think there are already a lot of things that are asked for at the firm level. So I don't think that adopting something here that touches on the firm level is something, new or per se unprecedented. Perhaps the subject matter here is, but because so many of these relate to independence, I also don't know if it's really that distant from that either. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Matthew. Let's take one more online, and then I'll hand over to the team. So Conchita, good afternoon.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I appreciate the presentation, the work done. These topics have been discussed even during the CAG days. So it has gone beyond much earlier than the SAC. Now, to my recall, the discussion started because of the high-profile scandals, the cases involving unethical behavior or conduct. Now, we are at the point where there seems to be a shift, as stated in the questions. Firm culture and governance, and then the impact of having a framework. I'd like to pose a question. Does it mean that the code as it is now is one thing, that there is a need to come up with a framework? All right, because we're talking of principles-based standards. Are the present provisions of the code wanting to address public interest? if the principles enunciated in the present code can stand time, why the need to change? If there's a need to probably strengthen, then the earlier discussion made where guidance is proposed may be the pathway to consider. Right? Now, on the principles, we all know the principles. And even in private corporation, these principles apply. Right? So the basic question I'd like to reiterate is there a felt need to change the code or to complement the code? Again, standards are supposed to be principles-based. Is there a need to change or to make a shift? I believe that the basic things in the present code can stand. Perhaps you just have to enhance the enforcement. And technology can probably cause a lot of problems later on because the professional accountant rely on technology developed and further enhanced by people who are not necessarily with the same mindset as the professional accountant. That there is, I believe, a gap between the developers of the software or the AI and the professional accountant. And this gap has not been defined and has not been addressed. Just my personal take, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Conchita. So, Gabriela, do I hand over to you to bring your team in and...
Thank you very much, Alan, and thank you very much to all of you who already contributed. This is really, really important and substantial. And we heard a lot of things, which some of them are not new, and we have been working on them. Some others are being put in a slightly different way. So really interesting and really important for us to continue this reflection. I'll probably just try to wrap the topics that have been raised here and give also Ken and Chana, my vice chair, who is also the project lead, the board advisor, who has been leading this from the board perspective, and Cam the opportunity to say something. But I think that what we heard here is, a lot about a few things about the scope of the project, some comments about covering just audit or the whole service lines, and the firm as a whole, if it is in the remit of the IAASB or not, if we have the mandate to cover everything or not. We heard about ISQM1 and how it interacts with the ISQM1. Suggestions for what I can call a phased approach, possibly first guidance and then possibly in the future evolve into standards, while others, and here the visions I think are blurred, while others clearly prefer the more authoritative journey or approach to have it in the code. So guidance versus standards, scalability importantly, and proportionality, if this is just for the big firms or for all of them. Principles-based as well, and some comments about the enforcement powers in case we cover the whole firm. So I think these were the main topics that were here mentioned. Thank you very much for these very substantial comments. I'm just listing the topics, but it was much more than that until now. Before I give my team and China the opportunity to say a few things, let me just clarify something, and this is to your comment, Doug, and then there was some other comments in that respect. There is no judgment about whether private equity investment in the accounting firms is good or bad. The only thing, and this is objective, is that it causes changes in the ownership and sometimes in the leadership of the firms. This is a fact. In the past, that was not that usual, that common and that frequent. So the firms were more stable in terms of ownership. These changes in ownership may drive different approaches, which is natural. Different people come with different approaches, and the firm has to decide what kind of firm it wants to be in terms of values, in terms of ethical approach, and etc. All that we are saying, and it was mentioned by some of the people, some of your colleagues here, is that these changes in ownership require the firm to be very well structured, to allow it to be resilient to all these changes and not be changing the ethical approach and the ethical culture and the ethical governance every time the ownership changes. No judgments, and again, we spoke about it yesterday. We are aware of the benefits and of the risks. So on our side, as an ethics standards board, we have no opinion about whether if it's good or bad. We just need to address the objective changes. And with this, I'll probably ask. Well, I see China. If you allow me to respond.
Yeah. Good evening, Chana.
Good evening, Alan. Good evening, Gabriela. So I'll try to deal with some of the issues that have been raised. I mean, we started this when this was put on the board's strategic work plan. It was 2023, and it was a burning platform, as it was termed at that stage. And then we got sidelined with sustainability. And so some might say we are moving fast, but I sort of see us as moving very slowly because it was put on the back burner because of sustainability. Dealing with some of the questions, so with the implementation of ISQM1, I think it's a huge generalization to say that firms have done it across the board. Because we have heard feedback when it was raised at the Australian Roundtable. The Financial Reporting Council chair of Australia said, no, that's not the case. He had recently done a review of the large firms in Australia, and some have done it across the firm and some have not, and it's limited to the assurance practice. So that can't be a assumption that you can make because each firm has done it differently. And the other thing is, unlike ISQC1, with ISQM1, you can come up with your own policies and procedures because it's the risk as it relates to you. So firms could have different things in their toolkit dealing with ISQM1. With regard to the code and the mandate over non-accountants, I mean, I can speak from Australian perspective, but it's probably similar things are operating elsewhere in the world, where if you are a partner in a firm, even if you're a non-accountant, you are part of the CA practice or the CPA practice. And in Australia, they give them a special membership, affiliate membership. And so you're still part of the firm. So if, you still carry that authority to do things on behalf of the firm. And there's also the issue of, when you're part of that CA brand and having that public practice certificate, there's also professional indemnity insurance. And all of that provides you the coverage So you can't have it both ways, like one way saying that, yes, you are part of that for, risk protection, but then you're not part of it because there is a requirement that might come via firm culture and governance that you might not like. And the code is applicable to the firm. So generally, people in the firm should follow the code. In respect of, I heard a few comments about the INE part. I don't, it's not the intention if some people have read it incorrectly that we are mandating or thinking about mandating INAs. All that point is trying to say is to get some external input. And maybe that term works better, I don't know. But it's like get an external viewpoint because you're in the silo. It's a partnership. You're in that silo. Let's get an external perspective. And how you get it, I think there are some examples in that viewpoint. How you get it could be varied. So there is proportionality built into that point. Yes, in terms of SMPs, clearly there has to be some sort of threshold. In the UK, they have the UK FASI governance code applies to firms that do more than 20 audits, 20 public interest entity audits. So that is also a live discussion that the team is having about the proportionality and whether there should be a threshold. That will be something we will explore further in the focus group meetings coming up. With regard to the other thing is ISQM1's focus is on quality management, and what we are talking about is ethical culture. Yes, ISQM refers here and there to it, but ethical culture is actually in the code. And in the code, already it addresses ethical culture in some paragraphs in section 120, which already has 5 of the 8 elements we are talking about. So it's already there. It may not be very specifically written for this, but it says when you think about organizational culture, these are things you need to think about. And so as a bare minimum, we would need to change the code to at least incorporate the other 3 elements that we have now identified through extensive work, because these 8 elements do work together. I mean, there was some focus today in the discussion and the presentation Cam made about the roundtables and the recent engagements. But during 2024, we went through an extensive process, about 60 plus meetings with people all around the world, from regulators, large firm reps. And through all of that, these 8 elements were identified, and it has remained fairly consistent right throughout the process. And I agree with Natasha's point where, yes, there's resistance, but I also can't understand why this is not being embraced, because this could be something that firms can point to about their social license to operate. I see Cam has a hand up, so I might let her speak and I might come back later if there are some additional points. Over to you, Cam.
Thank you, Chana.
Thanks, Chana. Thanks, Ellen. I'd just like to thank you for everyone's comments today, and the project team will definitely take them all on board. with respect to all the inputs for all three questions. There are some points I'd like to just add on to, which some of which Chana has already addressed. But with the first one, in terms of the remit of this project, and I'd just like to highlight here that the code is already applicable to firms, and specifically, for example, 34 of transnational firms already apply the code, and they in essence, the individuals in the firm need to comply with the fundamental principles and apply the conceptual framework. Having said this, what this means is that within the code already, there are provisions on organizational culture and the importance of culture in influencing individual behavior on this. So this is already in the code, which is applicable to firms, no matter what service line they're doing. With respect to sort of that, the comments made on sort of the root cause analysis, and as Chana mentioned, there's the working group report has also summarized extensive outreach and information gathering, including from academic research, which essentially highlights that unethical behavior and ethical failures does not necessarily stem from individual behaviors only. Usually, it's a consequence of a sort of a deeper systemic behavioral, a culture within the environment they're operating in. So that's the culture of, let's say, a team or within the firm. And so this means that the collective behavior really drives and influences the individual behavior and their compliance to the fundamental principles. And this is why sort of that the firm culture and governance framework is important to address these behavioral changes. Within the code itself, the provisions on organizational culture are currently at a high level and don't address these 8 elements in a more comprehensive way, and also from that collective behavior perspective in order to drive behavior. And also separately on independent input, and I know Chana has mentioned this, but we are cognizant that wording matters in terms of how various things are drafted. And so while our intent for the element and the viewpoints on independent input was not to characterize it as firms having to have an independent non-executive executive within their boards, the intent really was for that external challenge, so that when decisions are made, it's not only from internally. There is an objective voice asking questions and raising challenges. And for smaller practices, maybe this could be done, for example, through liaising with their jurisdictional professional organization PAOs, right? It could be done through a variety of different ways. It's not necessarily mandating independent board member. Just want to see in terms of the just wanted to reflect. Yeah, so I'll stop here for now, and then I'll come back in a little bit. So back to you, Alan. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Cam. Ken, do you want to?
I'll be very quick, Alan. I know Chana and Cam have already spoken at length, as well as Gabriela. Just a few points of additional context, and I'm not going to repeat all the explanations Chana, Gabriela, and Cam have shared. First of all, no decision has been made, meaning to say there's no presumption that the framework is going to end up in the code at this point. So all information is going to be analyzed, and there's going to be some options presented to our board in June, and the decision will be made at that point in time. So I think we have to kind of suspend judgment in that regard. What I would like to maybe share is a bit of insights from what we gleaned in our conversations as we went around the world. You know, we just in January we were in Asia, etc. We had direct engagements with large firms as well as smaller firms. In both groups, we heard views, basically saying, this is great. We've not seen this before. There isn't anything that's available that we can basically turn to. This has value to us. We can make use of that. How we deal with that and how we're going to implement it, of course, is to be seen, depending on where the framework goes. But I just want to emphasize this point that there are actually voices saying that there's benefit in having that framework. Secondly, we don't see this framework as really being a compliance exercise. Again, the concerns around, well, the firms have already implemented and invested so much in ISQM1. Is this going to be another redo or another retake of everything that they went through in implementing ISQM1? This is not intended to be a compliance exercise, and certainly the code by and large doesn't mandate documentation, except in a very few targeted circumstances, mostly in the area of independence. But by and large, so we had a lot of concerns around documentation and et cetera. What this is intended to drive is a mindset change at the leadership level. See this as really to your advantage. If you're in the firm, in a firm leadership role, see it as being beneficial to you. Importantly, because you know that your people business, the people who work in the firms will constantly churn, right? You have high turnover, especially when it comes to the audit practice. We know that. That's a reality, that's a fact. There are always going to be people coming in, there are always going to be people leaving out. And that's why it's so hard to get culture right. And it has to be a conversation that we would like to promote with this framework, a conversation that happens on an ongoing basis, as opposed to an after the fact, an annual exercise. Well, let's come up with our checklist. Let's make sure that we check all the boxes. That's really not the intent. It's not intended to really impose more cost than benefits. And speaking about costs and benefits, you've seen the headlines. You've seen the very significant harm and the damage that can happen when really there is an incidence of ethical failure. And those failures have happened even post-implementation of ISQM1. So many will argue, well, the firms have already implemented ISQM1, we have nailed culture. Well, we keep seeing those instances. Now, that's not to say that with this firm culture and governance framework, IASBA is going to completely eliminate all instances of ethical failures. Absolutely not. We know there will always be bad apples, just as there are laws and regulations, and there will always be criminals. But that doesn't obviate the need to have laws and regulations for the greater masses, so that everybody has a common point of reference. So all to say is, the direction we're trying to get at is really to balance all of these different considerations, all the perspectives and all the concerns, but importantly being driven by the overarching aim, which is to really drive a mindset change at the leadership level within the firms. And importantly, if the firms themselves have done 70, 80, 90% of what is in this framework as part of ISQM1, you're already mostly there. And what this framework will do is to provide you with a common point of reference. Just go through the key principles. You can, say, well, you've done 90% of these, and maybe there are one or two areas where maybe you can give it a bit more attention. But this is not going to be a whole exercise of reinventing how you approach your culture internally, how you organize yourself, how you structure your operations, etc. So anyway, just wanted to get across some key messages.
Thanks, Ken. We still have a lot of cards. So Susan.
Yes, so I am not going to beat a dead horse on this one. Gabriella, great summary, clear as mud, right? A lot of different positions around the table. I certainly think that changing firm structures are a big part of it. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head with that. Not just PE, but at least in the United States, we have employee stock ownership plans. And even firms that want to remain fiercely independent are restructuring their governance, creating CEO spots. And I'm talking about smaller firms, obviously. This is already the case at the largest firms, but creating CEOs, creating executive committees that are driving culture down. And actually, that's a really great opportunity to drive culture from the top. Whereas not changing the partnership model, but really consolidating that leadership. making sure that the firm is operating more like a business and considering all of these issues in a consistent way. I do think, so when I think about it, I do think about small firms as well as large firms and the breadth of practice, not just assurance. And I really do believe that firms would benefit from guidance. I do think guidance is the way to go because I think it can be developed much more meaningfully and robust and scalable than creating a baseline in the code, which is going to be, I think it's going to be incredibly hard to get that baseline that you want that has the substance you need. And, you know, Cam said it's already addressed in the code. So I think this concept of robust guidance to help firms kind of understand and drive that culture within all these new types of practices is probably a great first step.
Thank you very much, Susan. Nicole?
Yeah, thank you. I understand that the viewpoints are not a final product. Nonetheless, it seems it was a lot of work to develop them, and you are also raising the question whether the viewpoints could evolve into key principles. I believe it is very important that the viewpoints can be operationalized in order to be the basis for key principles. Just to state a few examples, for instance, in A7, what is a champion of ethical behavior? How do you operationalize valuing input? And there are much more examples. So I think an approach could be for the future to either focus on those viewpoints that are already operationalizable or to rephrase the others. We already heard wording is important in order to make them operationalizable. Then very few more detailed comment. When we consider the first element, which is named ethical leadership, all of the viewpoints relate to senior ethical leadership, so all of them. So maybe you might think about using the term senior ethical leadership for this first element. Then for the first element, when you look at one subheading, it is titled ethics-driven senior leadership. And I think by construction, all viewpoints have an ethics-driven perspective in it. So I would change this heading. I wouldn't use ethics-driven as it is inherently in all of the viewpoints. And for E4, if you want to keep the categorization, which is used thus far, so meaning that you first refer to this public interest rationale, then I would categorize E4 under public interest rationale as it clearly refers to the public interest. That's it. Thank you.
Nicole, thank you very much. And it's been said several times, I think, Dwayne, you started words matter, and you're absolutely right. So please, if you have any sort of editing suggestions that can't necessarily be picked up in this discussion, please do feed them in. That'll be extremely helpful to the IAASB team. But thank you very much. Now, Chikato, please.
Thank you for the presentation. And my understanding is that there are two streams of discussions right now. One is about whether we support the intent of the project. And then the second one is more like kind of the how to deliver intended effect. And I think there are still lots of discussions about the second stream of the discussion, and in which I believe that we would probably need to have more discussions, or like board would do more research. But I'm really in support of the intent of the project, and then I really like to support this. And then because of all the reason that many of the SAC members mentioned, I'm coming from the as an issuer, but also at the user of the financial statement as well as the non-financial statement. And then the professional firms' work is really a linchpin of the efficiency and credibility of the stock market and the capital market. And we heavily rely on that work. So extremely important. And then in the recent past, a long time, the governance has been understood to be very important to have a prevent the unethical behaviors and so on. But then in the recent past, not only among the corporate leadership or the firm's leadership, and then also in the space of the academia, of the business management, corporate culture's importance has been really emphasized. I think in a twofold. One is in the areas of the risk management, including the compliance and ethical business side, but also as a growth engine. And then governance to me is more like a kind of really tangible corporate or the firm structure. And then corporate culture is really intangible. This is something invisible, we cannot touch or we cannot really see. But then as Chan really well described, I think this is really collective patterned behavior or the mentality, and then which is there, but we can't really touch or see. But then it's very powerful, both, kind of encourage unethical behaviors, or, work as a kind of a really engine to prevent, ethical failures, but at the same time, really help, corporations' growth. So I think this is something, that, important for us to really address, and then both, governance and corporate culture. And I like to really also point out, I really think, also outside of the professional firms, in the corporate world, especially in the world of the publicly listed companies, governance has been really, seen as a very important factor for a healthy, really business and an ethical business. But also the corporate cultures are really, now having more attention. And then leadership commitment, I think, in my own experiences, sitting at the board and then also corporate board and also a senior management, leadership commitment is very important, and then independent oversight, and then incentives, but also disincentives are also very important, and then transparency to among, especially like 8 things like, pointed out in the presentation. And then I also like to emphasize really having a independent oversight at the professional firms. I think, many firms have really incorporated that, because I think when you're in the leadership, you see the need of independent oversight, so important. So I like to really support all those, elements, in the this project, and then also again, supporting the intent of the project. And then thank you for all the work.
Shikata, thank you very much. I mean, I like the way you've expressed some of it. Yes, it's trying to address risks and other things, but also, as you said, it creates opportunities for growth. So we should always look at this, that it's not just addressing the potentially problems, but it's also creating opportunities for the profession to stand out for what we do well, better than any other who might be able to provide the same level of services, but without the strong governance, the ethics, the culture, etc. So thank you very much for raising that. Claes, please.
Thank you very much. Just to pick up where we just ended up. So also I would like to express my strong support for the intent of this project. I think you have covered a lot of ground. You have done an excellent work by with the outreach you have made. So it's important. And I truly believe that where you're aiming at should be a foundation for accountancy firms regarding ethical behavior. So that's the intent of the project is excellent. A couple of observations. First of all, picking up some other points. I think it was Sue that mentioned this. Well, should this go into the code, or should the viewpoints evolve into what could be called a framework? I think those type of issues to try to address here should not be in the code. I think this should be developed into some kind of other material that you're aiming to. Maybe it's a framework if it develops into a framework, then I think it needs to be explained or defined what a framework really is then, of course. So, but I think for the arguments and reasons that Sue Ross just raised, I think that's the proper way forward to address those issues. And adding to another argument to that is, if you're aiming to touch the whole accountancy firm with all its service lines, I think that also is an issue or a matter that to think about where is the proper way to address the ethical issues if you're going for the whole firm and all the service lines. And that also points to the direction, not in the code, but develop some kind of other supportive material, I think. Couple of other points. One point that's not been raised is that I think there's something missing in the tech, in all the materials I have read here, is that all the principles you're trying to express are fine, but I miss kind of upfront a discussion about conflict of interest, because this is trying to address conflicts of interest. And maybe that could be made a little bit more explicit, I would say, in order to put in frame. Because if you read this, it's a very nice reading to say, yeah, if you just fix the ethical behaviors, everything would be fine. But there's pressure to make profits in a firm. The level of risk depending on the service line in the firm are different. And I think this is something that you need to, it's underlying, it's inherent in the discussions, of course. But I think it would be important to maybe to bring that up front, so to say, in order to really also explain the importance of the project, and also what the challenges are in implementing the viewpoints or the what could evolve into a framework or something else. I think that's very, very important also in the communication from IAASB also in the future when we enter into discussion with our stakeholders. Another point I think was Hilda's picked up also. My reflection is also that it's important to make the principle scalable in that sense. When I read especially the parts on independence and governance, you go into a small S&P firm, the situation is quite different in that sense. And I take Ken's comment about cost-benefit analysis, which also Dwayne touched upon. I think it's important not to make it a compliance exercise. I'm glad you're aware of that. But I think it's also important because if you think about scalability in the end, it's very important to make this operational. I think that's Nicole pointed to. Thanks.
Thank you, Claes. Isabel?
Thank you. So I'd like to commend IAASB for the substance and the maturity of the work undertaken, and for the time that you've invested in a project that for me sits at the core of a fundamental tension in the audit profession, which is delivering on a public interest mandate while operating within for-profit organizations, whether within assurance itself or the broader services that firms provide. And I think this is a tension that regulators and investors are increasingly focused on, given its direct implications for trust in financial reporting and for market integrity. So against that backdrop, just wanted to highlight, I don't find it surprising that, that's generated both strong support and strong resistance. I think from a regulatory and possibly an investor perspective, the debate is not optional. Expectations around firm behavior, incentives, and accountability have risen materially in recent years. At the risk of repeating myself, I'd like to recall the 3 lines of defense in the financial reporting ecosystem. So corporate governance, auditors, and then regulators and investors. So auditors, occupy a central position within this architecture. They stand between issuers and capital markets. They have privileged access to audited entities and underlying information. And they play a critical role that securities and all audit regulators alone cannot replicate. I've heard talk about, more enforcement. you also need to look at the means that are given to public authorities to do this, and this is why I'm saying that we cannot replicate it. So as a result, authorities place significant reliance on audit firms to act as effective gatekeepers and uphold high standards of integrity, independence, and professional judgment. So as a number of us have highlighted, the profession is currently facing significant structural and operational challenges, including pressures on business models, talent, and firm incentives. And so these developments heighten the concerns among the regulators about the sustainability of audit quality and further underline the importance of this project. So you won't be surprised that I would strongly support the continuation of the work towards a robust firm culture and governance framework that would be included in the code. So from a regulatory standpoint, the work stream is critical to enforcing accountability within firms, aligning incentives with the public interest, and ultimately strengthening confidence in the audit function and the reliability of corporate reporting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isabella. We're just going to go back. Vasiliki, please.
Thank you. So I won't repeat everything that's been said, just to echo what Dwayne, Hilda, and Susan have said. We also strongly have the view that non-authoritative guidance is the way to go. It allows firms across the world to, work with their structures, jurisdictions, regulation, etc., and work with the guidance that's given. A global standard that tries to capture that is going to be very difficult to put in place and might take a very long time with unintended consequences. Things that perhaps could be added to the code, or not to the code, to the guidance, is consideration of how we deal with third parties or external parties that the professional firms rely on. Perhaps a little bit more about the how. So there's a lot of guidance around what needs to be done, but sometimes, as we said, it is in the words. So when we talk about psychological safety, other examples, best practices, etc., that could be shared, and even a ethical behavior framework or guide map would be helpful in the code.
Thank you, Vasiliki. Jose?
Thank you. Have two different points of view, maybe opposite. And maybe because my jet lag, I cannot choose which one of those. So I want to put quickly both. The first one, I think, is a very, very good job. And when we talk about the current proposal, I think that the concept of firm culture is not necessary and intangible one. I think we may measure it. And I think Matthew required for some kind of measure. So I suggest just three. And very, very measurable and very easy to comply. The first one, independent boards. We talked about this, I think, 2 years ago in New York. The second one is public financial statements. We also talked about it 2 years ago. And the third one is there is a lot of public independent assessment around the world. For example, PCOV. And those are public, but the firms doesn't use it publicly. So we should push them to public them around the world. And if you read the PCOV webpage, the reports are terrible in some jurisdictions. So this is one point of view. And my second point of view is that when we talk about firm culture, at the end of the day, we are talking about corporate governance. And we are talking about our promise in the last 2 days regarding adoption and implementation of the statements here, fragmentation among regulators and jurisdictions. So thinking about why it's happening, maybe the problem is that we have too much framework, too much regulators, too much viewpoints, etc. So why we just don't use one universal recognized principle of corporate governance? For example, the OECD, for example, King 4, or for example, the COSO, which is being working right now by, I think, Pricewaterhouse. So to get it and measure the company against the framework. And this is also measurable. So those are my two ideas.
Thank you, Jose. Koichiro?
Thank you very much. So I'm conscious of time and focusing on the new comment, which is, I think we should focus on the outcome, which is, end of the day, we have the ISQM1 already. And if there is a new product, the combination we try to achieve the outcome, chances are it can be like some kind of like building block. ISQM1 serve the needs, and then if there is some missing area, the output from the IAASB would be added on, something like that. Having said that, I think it's important to clearly identify the issue we want to address. So the private equity is a new development, and we think that there would be risks and opportunities. At the same time, we need to understand more about implications. So maybe we need to have clearer picture about issues, and then we're going to have clearer understanding on the way forward. Having said that, we think that this topic is very important, and we really appreciate all the initiatives made by Gabriela. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Koichiro. Monica.
Thank you, and also trying to be very brief. First, on question one, what is driving the shift? Just an additional element that is driving here, the adoption of ISQM. The adoption of ISQM at the firms is forcing, I mean in a positive way, firms to rethink their firm culture and governance. So it's not only about the pressure or market in general. Second point was just mentioned here, maybe what still is missing, although I thank for the deep content that was already brought, more clarification or more integration is needed among the framework, ISQM1, and the code. I understand the description on not overloading and so on, but when we think in practice for the market and for the profession, this is still confusing and needs to be clarified. On being voluntary or not, it would depend on future deeper scalability of what is stated here. In conceptual concept, the definitions are perfect, although I also missed the aspect of conflict of interest that was just mentioned. But when we consider the reality of the firms, the scalability, if it turns mandatory, it needs to be better determined. And last but not least, when we think on firms, we are basically focusing here, understand, as on audit firms, and this was briefly also mentioned here. When we think on firms worldwide, this might include not only other types of services as advisory and so on, but also, for example, outsourcing firms. And this is very common worldwide. And I do see value, and I think this framework would be important for all firms, not only for audit firms. And this reinforces the importance of this scalability. And just to conclude my suggestion, I know it's not a purpose, but all this content on this framework could, and I believe should be used to develop something to be used
at the companies, so not only by the firms. I understand the first clarifications of Gabriela, but I think this would bring a great value for the companies in general. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Can I, Nicholas, just an apology, because you've had your card up for longer than the ones I've been asking to come in recently. In fact, you after Jakarta. So could I bring you in, and then I'll come to Hina, and then Andrea. Okay.
Yes. Congratulations to the project team for the excellent document and work done. I think the thing here is to bridge the two groups together. We have the one side the ethical, the IAASB one, and the IASBA few points. So the question is how to bring them together, and they can embed these ethical viewpoints in the firm's IASB one and be mutual supportive. This can only be done through some guidance. And the guidance, people are talking about scalability. The scalability, I think, is the main concern here is if you have if you audit pie companies. That's the big issue here, because that's the big risks in public interest entities. So I think that is the main important thing. About private equity, because the first question we talk about firm culture and governance. So what we have here, we have an audit firm, a plain audit firm, and they have the minds on audit quality. And then private equity purchase the shares like 50% or 49% or whatever. So they have in mind, they want profits, and the audit partner wants audit quality. So how do these two people, these two groups, try to invest so they can have the long term to have audit quality? So that can only be, from my experience, just like listed companies, to embed strict corporate governance rules, have independent board members, and audit committees, so they can control and have and bring the cultures and the ethics to a more higher standard, because the private equity will want to do audits with the auditor on their groups in their private equity subsidiaries, etc. So it depends. Lots of things arise when you have private equity. So you have independence, you have to mindset, and you have to maintain that corporate governance that existed before the entry of private equity. So it is a very, it could be harmful if they're not, the audit firm does not have strong ethical and governance structure.
So we got 3 to go. So Hina, Ivandria, and then Javier. But if you just be quick, because we are a little bit tight for time. Thank you.
I also really want to appreciate the work which has been done, and extremely important to highlight it separately because the significance in the best public interest. I just wanted to share an example of the pressure that the audit firms have in our jurisdiction. Recently, the tax authorities have included a clause in the law and requiring that if the sales are not reported properly in the audited accounts, they will initiate proceedings against the audit firm and may require a separate audit by the authority. So that kind of perception exists, and that is actually driving more ethical responsibilities on the auditor, giving more pressure. And I feel that the discussions which they have, extensive discussions and roundtables, that has given a lot of realities and developing in the future direction. It will help IASBA in developing this framework. So I will support the voluntary adoption of this framework. The thing, the 8 elements are perfect, and they will make a ground for voluntary adoption, in the sense that the guidance will not be taken as a proper, the people will not take it as a proper guidance for the adoption. Voluntary adoption will be a first step that may be reviewed after some time for a permanent adoption in the code. So that will help the smaller firms as well as large firms in adopting, in taking the guidance and benefit from the discussion and from the framework realities, and including their embedding in their firm culture. So that is my suggestion. So thank you.
Gina, I was just surprised you said that the authorities are going to go after the auditor.
Yes.
If the company misreports its sales.
Yes,
What
that's,
about-
we have raised a lot
about-
of voice
What about
against.
going after the board of directors and those charged with governance?
Yes, that's what our point
It's
is.
so easy to point the finger at the auditors, but whereas, those who are accountable.
Exactly. That's the point, and that's the pressure, the kind of pressure we have.
But I think we should all, step up, and I know the UK government was going to introduce some reforms which they backed away from in terms of those charged with governance. I think we really have to sort of.
Exactly. We have raised from the
Yeah.
PAO levels, we have
Good.
raised a
Okay,
discussion with the
excellent, thank
ministry
you.
also.
Let me not get excited by this. Ivanria, please.
And excellent, framework, but I'm more concerned about the future, the near future, in a sense that we know that private equity, the exit strategy, right? It's pretty important, especially given the fact that not only in terms of consolidation, but also in terms of the current audit practice and this new, event of artificial intelligence. My point is, I was part of the advisory board for a bank, huge bank in Brazil. And there was a fraud of, a retail chain. And all the big 3 audit firms were at some point, responsible to audit the financial statements. So my main concern, and as a debt holder or a shareholder, right, is the consolidation, and more important, what's the purpose of having financial statements audit? Because at the end of the day, right, in the case of some situations that I'm facing, as a representative of a minority shareholder, at the end of the day, right, when we have those scandals, especially involving, 3 big audit firms, right? I cannot trust in the financial statement audit, So I think that what we are missing in this analysis, moving forward for the 2028 plan, strategic plan, and so on, is that the exit strategy of private equities, we're talking about very short period of time, that the whole industry, in my point of view, will change completely.
Thanks, but do you support the work that is being done on firm culture and governance?
Sorry, what did you say?
Do you support the work that's being done on firm culture and governance?
Yes, I do. But my point is kind of, we need to not work backwards.
No,
okay, we need to look at the future, which is pretty, it's coming now, because at the end of the day, we know that private equity in general, we are talking about 5-year exit plan.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, to be concrete, I think that first of all, as an investor, I think it's a very good idea to have this project. We support the project. I think it's really touching upon many key things. I think this has been mentioned around the table, and definitely I think it's a very good point that the whole project and the whole ethics permeates through the whole company. It stays only on the top. I understand that the leadership and the top people has to implement that, but has to go down the rest of the firm. So I think that's very, very important. That happened in many other things. I mean, it's not just, this is one more example on the corporate life anyway. So that definitely is one thing. The other thing, and I think Klaus is the one who mentioned about conflict of interest. As investors, we are always raising flags with a conflict of interest of auditing firms with companies and all those things. So therefore, I think that's another element that definitely should be considered. I don't know exactly the code, it should be somewhere else, but that's the point really here with the conflict of interest. And the second point is no more a point, it's a question for someone. I don't know, someone is talking, that should be the project out of the scope of the IAASB-IESBA. I don't know what you mean by out of the scope of IAASB-IESBA, going where? And only for audit firms. So the project should be, what it is not only for audit firms, where it should go. And what is out of the scope of IAASB-IESBA also, where it should go. I'm a little confused with that. I mean, I don't know exactly that comment, what it meant. And I think it should stay where it belongs, it's IAASB-IESBA. Okay, and also I'm a little confused with, I heard comments about private equity here. What is the interaction with the project with private equity? You mean when a company, an auditing firm, when a private equity firm buys an auditing firm to apply the code to the private equity firm? I'm sorry, but I didn't see the connection. Someone can explain to me or can be very clear, I would appreciate that.
Maybe I would suggest that you can take directly offline with Javier to.
We can do later, yeah.
Yeah, to clarify because we won't have time to do that in here.
Okay.
But
that's fine.
Thanks. But anyway, you know, as an investor, you support it, and that's great.
Yeah, and as I said, permeate.
Yeah, and as you said, culture goes all the way from as I think somebody mentioned King Code. It's, you know, it's the tone at the top and the beat of the feet at the bottom, and that's how you get strong governance and a strong culture. Right. So it's now 11:15. I don't expect you to obviously comment on what every individual piece of what you've heard. But what I would say, and I will hand it over to you, is that actually, I believe you've got a very strong support for what you're doing. Yes, there are issues that you need to take into account. You know, I've heard about scalability, about conflict of interest and framing it, etc. But you know, what I've heard is generally very strong support and willingness, you know, to give you further input to help you make your decision when you get to your board in June. So let me hand over to you, Gabrielle.
Well, you said it all, Chair, so that's because that you are the Chair, but let me just first thank you very much for this very, very good and very substantial conversation. We'll just like Alan, I think that we can conclude that we have here strong support for the project, for the intent and for the project to move forward. And this is a strong signal of the project's relevance, of the project's timeliness, even if we are taking some time to move forward with it. Some say that we are taking too long, even if I'm known because I always want things to move very fast, and my team complains a lot about it. This time, I think that we are taking the time that we needed to take to get where we are. And I think that conversation speaks volumes about the importance of having taken that time and all those steps. Of course, we acknowledge that there are some topics and some issues that we will need to address. That was our expectation. There are some mixed visions and mixed perspectives about a few topics, namely specifically the level of authority that this framework will have, if it should sit in the code, outside the code, and we will take this back for reflection, measure, etc., combined with everything that we will have heard from the focus groups, conversations, the simulation, etc. So, but that's very important that we have all these, sometimes some criticism that we have heard, which helped us get where we are as well, because we listened actively to all of this. So we also value very much this group and the dialogue with this group. It's really always not only a pleasure, but a privilege to go back with all this combination of visions, of opinions, very, very generous, because we know that you're not here to serve yourself, but to serve us. And we will never forget that. It's really really important. It's been a very inclusive and participated project so far. It's going to be like that in the future. There are a few things that were raised here that then we can take it offline or continue the conversation that are really important for us. But the main takeaway is, on the one hand, the strong support for the project. The second, that we need still to address some options and some alternatives, the proposals for phased approach, the scalability, the authority. All these things are things that we need to continue addressing and assessing. This is really a collective path forward, and it's very strong because it brings diverse views. And of course, we will decide in June how to start again the project based on the public interest considerations that we will ultimately always serve. So thank you so much for this very good conversation, for your openness and for how much this will serve us for the next steps.
And I thank you, Gabriela and Ken and Jana and Cam, for the work you're doing, and of course all the other members of your team. For, as you said, it's been a journey of more than 2 years, and you still have the energy to keep going. So well done. Right. So now we've come to the end of the sort of formal agenda. So a very intensive day and a bit. So thank you very much. So before we close the meeting, we always like to ask the PIOB observer just to share your remarks and observations. So if I could invite you, Shego, who's also the chair of the PIOB. So we're actually honored and privileged to have you with us. If you would like to, share your observations, and also maybe, if you would like to, as PIOB, to comment on, any of the positions you have on anything you've heard over the last day and a half. That would be fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. And I must say this is, I think, the first for me, first observation for the SAC. And I must say it's been an enlightening experience. I can see the benefits of having such a diverse group of people, given the richness of the conversations that have come. And I think I mentioned this to Alan last night, that despite that diversity, I quite like how effective he has been as the chair of bringing the conversations together at the end to close and move to the next agenda item. So I think as an observer, this has been quite an enjoyable 2 days or a day and a half, in the sense that I think when the PIOB saw the shift from the old SAC, the CAC, to the new SAC, there's definitely been benefits in the restructured SAC, given the effectiveness that I've witnessed in the last day and a half. And I think when we do reflect on the first 3 years of whether the SAC has been objective and has, I think, done what it was supposed to do, I find myself conflicted because I was part of that meeting that is getting towards that 3rd year space. And I've had firsthand experience of seeing that in action. And I think, Chair, from my PIOB hat, I think it's been a delight to see that we were on the right track in terms of why it was formed in the first place, and the benefit that really adds on to the work of the SSBs as we have received in the last 2 days, both from the IAASB's yesterday's input and today the input for the IAASB-IESBA. I also have to declare I'm heavily conflicted because I'm the chair for the SSBs, as well as I am the PIOB chair who's the oversight of the SSBs. But it's a transitional role as we evolve, and we'll talk a bit more about that in the next private session. Yeah, but I think for me, I'm really proud of seeing the objectives being realized before my very eyes. in the last day and a half. I don't think I can add anything else except to say, keep up the good work. Really, the value of the diversity has come through. And I think the SSB chairs would echo my words in saying that the feedback that they've received, which inputs into their work, really has been valuable in the last, it is where I stand, I think it's been very valuable, and I can see the diversity come through. Let me stop there, Chair.
Thank you very much, and really appreciate it. And thank you for, spending so much of your valuable time with us over the past day and a half. Right, so let me now invite the two chairs for any final closing remarks they may have. I'll start with you because Gabriella's been on all morning, so let me start with you, Tom.
I really should just reiterate what our PIOB chair said, that we've appreciated your time, the input, Alan, your leadership, the PIOB for hosting us here. I think this is probably the most well-attended meeting we've had in some time. And Mother Nature for cooperating with us over the last couple of days. But thank you, and certainly, this is really important for us to gather, the challenge of getting, when you serve over 130 markets throughout the world, is getting diverse perspectives, and being able to bring this group together enables us to hear together, but maybe even more importantly, to hear you talk to each other, and rather than in just a purely bilateral sense. So thank you again, and we will certainly inform you, but you should know that your words have impact on our work.
Thank you, Tom. Gabriella?
Thank you, Alan. I will repeat Tom's words in terms of thanking you all once again for your time, for your inspiration. We will go back home richer than we came here, and it's a big investment on your side. I think we have an agency problem here because you invest, we are the beneficiaries of your investment, but we hope that with this, we will give back to all of you with hopefully good work based on this excellent advice. Alan, thank you very much also for your dedication to this SAC and your leadership, and to the PIOB as well for hosting us and allowing us to have this very inspiring time in this inspiring city and place. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gabriella. So the next SAC meeting will be on the 20th and 21st of October, also for the Americans, October 20 and 21. At the moment, we're planning for it to be in New York, although there has been some discussions yesterday evening with offers for alternative venues, etc. But, the dates are set. The venue is probably set for New York, but we'll get back to you in very, very quickly if that's not going to be the case, because obviously you need to make arrangements for visas and travel and all of that stuff. As is our custom, certainly I think we've done it at least twice now. The SAC team will send out a questionnaire sort of soon. Obviously we want to use it to gather the feedback from your meeting, and also what improvements we can continue to make. Yes, we think we're effective, but we can always improve further. So thanks for those comments. And of course, any suggestions for topics of future meetings will also be very, very valuable. Again, I'd like to thank the SAC members for your immense and very valuable contributions, which of course the chairs have already expressed. And I'd also like to thank the public observers for being with us. Some of you have come a long way away, so I really appreciate you being here. So that then brings us to the end of the SAC meeting. We will have a sort of a private session of SAC members. What I suggest is that we take a 50-minute break, so then we're absolutely back on time, because we're due to start at 11:45. So if that's okay, we'll take a 70-minute break. Thank you to the public observers, both present physically and also those that are online, and look forward to seeing you at our next meeting. So thank you very much.